The culture of Brazil is primarily Western, but presents a very diverse nature, showing that an ethnic and cultural mixing occurred in the colonial period involving mostly indigenous peoples of the coastal and most accessible riverine areas, Portuguese people and African peoples. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, together with further waves of Portuguese colonization, Italians, Spaniards, Germans, Levantine Arabs, Nipponics, Poles, Helvetians and Ukrainians settled in Brazil, playing an important role in its culture as it started to shape a multicultural and multi-ethnic society. As a consequence of 3 centuries of colonization by the Portuguese Empire, the core of Brazilian culture is derived from the culture of Portugal. The numerous Portuguese inheritances include the language, the predominant religion and the colonial architectural styles. These aspects, however, were influenced by African and indigenous American traditions, as well as those from other Western European countries. Some aspects of Brazilian culture are contributions of Italian, German and other European immigrants. Amerindian people and Africans played a large role in the formation of Brazilian language, cuisine, music, dance and religion. This diverse cultural background has helped boast many celebrations and festivals that have become known around the world, such as the Brazilian Carnival and the Bumba Meu Boi. The colorful culture creates an environment that makes Brazil a popular destination for many tourists each year, around over 1 million. Language. The official language of Brazil is Portuguese. It is spoken by about 99% of the population, making it one of the strongest elements of national identity. There are only some Amerindian groups and small pockets of immigrants who do not speak Portuguese, reflecting the mixed ethnic background of the country. Brazilian Portuguese is a variation of the Portuguese language that includes a large number of words of indigenous American and African origin. Minority languages are spoken throughout the nation. 180 Amerindian languages are spoken in remote areas and a number of other languages are spoken by immigrants and their descendants. There are significant communities of German and Italian speakers in the south of the country, both of which are influenced by the Portuguese language, not to mention the Slavic communities, Ukrainians and Poles, which are also part of these minorities' languages. The Brazilian Sign Language, known by the acronym Libras, is officially recognized by law, albeit using it alone would convey a very limited degree of accessibility throughout the country. Religion. About 2/3 of the population are Roman Catholics. Catholicism was introduced and spread largely by the Portuguese Jesuits, who arrived in 1549 during the colonization with the mission of converting the indigenous people. The Society of Jesus played a large role in the formation of Brazilian religious identity until their expulsion of the country by the Marquis of Pombal in the 18th century. In recent decades, Brazilian society has witnessed a rise in Protestantism. Between 1940 and 2010, the percentage of Roman Catholics fell from 95% to 64.6%, while the various Protestant denominations rose from 2.6% to 22.2%. History. Brazil was a colony of Portugal for over 3 centuries. About 1 million Portuguese settlers arrived during this period and brought the culture to the colony. The indigenous inhabitants of Brazil had much contact with the colonists. Many became extinct, others mixed with the Portuguese. For that reason, Brazil also holds Amerindian influences in its culture, mainly in its food and language. Brazilian Portuguese has hundreds of words of indigenous American origin, mainly from the Old Tupi language. Black Africans, who were brought as slaves to Brazil, also participated actively in the formation of Brazilian culture. Although the Portuguese colonists forced the slaves to convert to Catholicism and speak Portuguese, the cultural influences were absorbed by the Inhabitants of Brazil have all races and origins. Some regions of Brazil, especially Bahia, have particularly notable African inheritances in music, cuisine, dance and language. Immigrants from Italy, Germany, Spain, Japan, Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Austria-Hungary and the Middle East played an important role in the areas they settled. They organized communities that became important cities such as Joinville, Caxias do Sul, Blumenau, Curitiba and brought important contributions to the culture of Brazil. Carnival. The Brazilian Carnival is an annual festival held 46 days before Easter. Carnival celebrations are believed to have roots in the pagan festival of Saturnalia, which, adapted to Christianity, became a farewell to bad things in a season of religious discipline to practice repentance and prepare for Christ's death and resurrection. Carnival is the most famous holiday in Brazil and has become an event of huge proportions. For almost a week festivities are intense, day and night, mainly in coastal cities. The typical genres of music of Brazilian Carnival are samba, enredo and marchinha, frevo, maracatu and axé music. Cuisine. Brazilian cuisine varies greatly by region. This diversity reflects the country's mix of natives and immigrants. This has created a national cooking style marked by the preservation of regional differences. Since the colonial period, the feijoada has been the country's national dish. Luís da Câmara Cascuda Rebat, having been revised and adapted in each region of the country, it is no longer just a dish, but has become a complete food. Rice and beans, also present in the feijoada and considered basic at Brazilian tables, is highly regarded as healthy because it contains almost all amino acids, fiber, and starches needed for basic human nutrition. Aside the non-heme present in beans, Brazil has a variety of candies that are traditionally eaten for birthday parties, like brigadeiros and beijinhos. Other foods typically consumed in Brazilian parties are coxinas, churrasco, sfiha, empanadas, and pine nuts. Especially in the state of Minas Gerais, are produced and consumed the famous cheese bun. The typical northern food is pato no tucupi, tacacá, caruru, vatapa, and manicoba. The northeast is known for moqueca, acarajé, which is filled with dried shrimp and red pepper, manioc, dis hominy, dumpling, and quibebi. In the southeast, it is common to eat Minas cheesed pizza, tuto, sushi, stew, polenta, and masses of macaroni, lasagna, and gnocchi. In the south, these foods are also popular, but the churrasco is the typical meal of Rio Grande do Sul. Cachaça is Brazil's native liquor, distilled from sugar cane, and it is the main ingredient in the national drink, the caipirinha. Brazil is the world leader in production of green coffee, because the Brazilian fertile soil. The country could produce and expand its market maker and often establish its economy with coffee, since the Brazilian slavery, which created a whole culture around this national drink, which became known as the fever of coffee, and satirized in the novelty song, the Coffee Song, sung by Frank Sinatra and with lyrics by Bob Hilliard, interpreted as an analysis of the coffee industry, and of the Brazilian economy and culture. Visual arts. Painting and sculpture. The oldest known examples of Brazilian art are cave paintings in Serra da Capivara National Park in the state of Piauí, dating back to c. 13,000 BC. In Minas Gerais and Goiás have been found more recent examples showing geometric patterns and animal forms. One of the most sophisticated kinds of pre-Columbian artifact found in Brazil is the sophisticated Maria pottery, from cultures flourishing on Maranhão Island and around the region of Santarém, and statuettes and cult objects, such as the small carved stone amulets Jesuits called Muriquitas also belonged to these cultures. Many of the Jesuits worked in Brazil under the influence of the Baroque, the dominant style in Brazil until the early 19th century. The Baroque in Brazil flourished in Bahia and Pernambuco and Minas Gerais, generating valuable artists like Manuel da Costa Tide and especially the sculptor-architect Helvetians. In 1816, the French artistic mission in Brazil created the Imperial Academy of Fine Arts and imposed a new concept of artistic education and was the basis for a revolution in Brazilian painting, sculpture, architecture, graphic arts, and crafts. A few decades later, under the personal patronage of Emperor Dom Pedro II, who was engaged in an ambitious national project of modernization, the Academy reached its golden age, fostering the emergence of the first generation of Romantic painters, whence Victor Meirelles and Pedro Américo, that, among others, produced lasting visual symbols of national identity. It must be said that in Brazil Romanticism in painting took a peculiar shape, not showing the overwhelming dramaticism, fantasy, violence, or interest in death and the bizarre commonly seen in the European version, and because of its academic and palatial nature all excesses were eschewed. The beginning of the 20th century saw a struggle between old schools and modernist trends. Important modern artists Anita Malfatti and Tarsila do Amaral were both early pioneers in Brazilian art. Both participated of the Week of Modern Art Festival held in São Paulo in 1922, that renewed the artistic and cultural environment of the city and also presented artists such as Emiliano di Cavalcanti, Vicente de Rego Monteiro, and Victor Brecciare. Based on Brazilian folklore, many artists have committed themselves to mix it with the proposals of the European Expressionism, Cubism, and Surrealism. From Surrealism arises Ismael Neri, concerned with metaphysical subjects where the pictures appear on imaginary scenarios and averse to any recognizable reference. In the next generation, the modernist ideas of the Week of Modern Art have affected a moderate modernism that could enjoy the freedom of the strict academic agenda, with more features conventional method, best exemplified by the artist Candido Portinari, which was the official artist of the government in mid-century. In recent years, names such as Oscar Araripe, Beatriz Milhazes and Romero Brito have been well acclaimed. Architecture. Brazilian architecture in the colonial period was heavily influenced by the Portuguese manual and style, albeit adapted for the tropical climate. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, the city of Ouro Preto in the state of Minas Gerais contains numerous well-preserved examples of this style by artists such as Helvetians. In later centuries, Brazilian architects were increasingly influenced by schools from other countries such as France and the United States, eventually developing a style of their own that has become known around the world. Architects such as Oscar Niemeyer have received much acclaim, with the Brazilian capital Brasilia being the most notable example of modern Brazilian architecture. Niemeyer received the Pritzker Architecture Prize in 1988, and in 2006 the prize was awarded to Brazilian architect Paulo Mendes da Rocha. In recent decades, Brazilian landscape architecture has also attracted some attention, particularly in the person of Roberto Burle Marx. Some of this notable works of the Copacabana Promenade in Rio de Janeiro and the Ibirapuera Park in São Paulo. Cinema and theatre. Cinema has a long tradition in Brazil, reaching back to the birth of the medium in the late 19th century, and gained a new level of international acclaim in recent years. The documentary film Bus 174 by José Padilla, about a bus hijacking, is the highest-rated foreign film at Rotten Tomatoes. O Pegador de Promessas, directed by Anselmo Duarte, won the Palme d'Or at the 1962 Cannes Film Festival, the only Brazilian film to date to win the award. Fernando Meirelles' City of God is the highest-rated Brazilian film on the IMDb Top 250 list and was selected by Time magazine as one of the 100 best films of all time in 2005. The highest-grossing film in Brazilian cinema, taking 12 million viewers to cinemas, is Dona Flor and Her Two Husbands, directed by Bruno Barreto and based on the novel of the same name by Jorge Amado. Acclaimed Brazilian filmmakers include Glauber Rocha, Fernando Meirelles, José Padilha, Anselmo Duarte, Walter Salles, Eduardo Coutinho and Alberto Cavalcanti. Theatre was introduced by the Jesuits during the colonization, particularly by Father José de Anchieta, but did not attract much interest until the transfer of the Portuguese court to Brazil in 1808. Over the course of the 18th century, theatre evolved alongside the blossoming literature traditions with names such as Martins Peña and Gonçalves-Dias. Peña introduced the comedy of manners, which would become a distinct mark of Brazilian theatre over the next decades. Theatre was not included in the 1922 Modern Art Week of São Paulo, which marked the beginning of Brazilian modernism. Instead, in the following decade, Oswald de Andrade wrote O Radar Vela, which would become the manifesto of the Tropicalismo movement in the 1960s, a time where many playwrights used theatre as a means of opposing the Brazilian military government such as Gianfrancisco Guarnieri, Augusto Boal, Dias Gomes, Oduvaldo Viana Filho and Plinio Marcos. With the return of democracy and the end of censorship in the 1980s, theatre would again grow in themes and styles. Contemporary names include Gerald Thomas, Ulysses Cruz, Adabal Frei Filho, Eduardo Delantinho de Araujo, Caca Rosset, Gabriel Villa, Marcio Viana, Moa Kiergos and Antonio Araujo. Dancers: Oi, Foro, Frevo, Lombarda, Lundu, Makalele, Maxix, Samba Samba de Gafieira, Zaxardo, Hoti, Zouk Lombarda. Music is one of the most instantly recognizable elements of Brazilian culture. Many different genres and styles have emerged in Brazil, such as samba, coro, bossa nova, MPB, frevo, foro, maracatu, sertanejo, brega and axé. Samba is among the most popular music genres in Brazil and is widely regarded as the country's national musical style. It developed from the mixture of European and African music, brought by slaves in the colonial period and originated in the state of Bahia. In the early 20th century, modern samba emerged and was popularized in Rio de Janeiro behind composers such as Noel Rosa, Cartola and Nelson Cavaquinho among others. The movement later spread and gained notoriety in other regions, particularly in Bahia and São Paulo. Contemporary artists include Martinho da Vila, Zeca Pagodinho and Paulinho da Viola. Samba makes use of a distinct set of instruments. Among the most notable are the cuica, a friction drum that creates a high-pitched squeaky sound, the cavaquinho, a small instrument of the guitar family, and the pandeiro, a hand-frame drum. Other instruments are the surdos, agogos, chocalhos and tamborins. Coro originated in the 19th century through interpretations of European genres such as polka and schottische by Brazilian artists who had already been influenced by African rhythms such as the batuque. It is a largely instrumental genre that shares a number of characteristics with samba. Coro gained popularity around the start of the 20th century and was the genre of many of the first Brazilian records in the first decades of the 20th century. Notable coro musicians of that era include Chiquinha Gonzaga, Pixinguinha and Joaquim Calado. The popularity of coro steadily waned after the popularization of samba but saw a revival in recent decades and remains appreciated by a large number of Brazilians. There are a number of acclaimed coro artists nowadays such as Altamiro Carrillo, Yamando Costa and Paulo Bellinati. Bossa Nova and MPB. Bossa Nova is a style of Brazilian music that originated in the late 1950s. It has its roots on samba but features less percussion, employing instead a distinctive and percussive guitar pattern. Bossa Nova gained mainstream popularity in Brazil in 1958 with the song Chega de Saudade, written by Antonio Carlos Jobim and Vinicius de Moraes. Together with João Gilberto, Jobim and Moraes would become the driving force of the genre, which gained worldwide popularity with the song Garota de Ipanema as interpreted by Gilberto. His wife Estrada Stan gets on the album Gets Gilberto. The bossa nova genre remains popular in Brazil, particularly among the upper classes and in the southeast. MPB was a trend in Brazilian music that emerged after the bossa nova boom. It presents many variations and includes elements of styles that range from samba to rock music. In the 1960s, some MPB artists founded the short-lived but highly influential Tropicalia movement, which attracted international attention. Among those were Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, Tom Zeddy, Acute Gnarlio and Os Mutant. Sertanejo is the most popular genre in Brazilian mainstream media since the 1990s. It evolved from música caipira over the course of the 20th century, a style of music that originated in Brazilian countryside and that made use of the viola caipira, although it presents nowadays a heavy influence from American country music. Beginning in the 1980s, Brazil saw an intense massification of the sertanejo genre in mainstream media and an increased interest by the phonographic industry. As a result, sertanejo is today the most popular music genre in Brazil in terms of radio play. Common instruments in contemporary sertanejo are the acoustic guitar, which often replaces the viola, the accordion and the harmonica, as well as electric guitar, bass and drums. Traditional acts include Caeteozinho and Amp, Zororo, Zezé de Camargo and Amp, Luciano, Leonardo and Daniel. Newer artists such as Michel Tello, Luan Santana, Gustavo Lima have also become very popular recently among younger audiences. Fado and Frevo. Fado and Frevo, two music and dance forms, originated in the Brazilian Northeast. Fado, like coro, originated from European folk genres such as the schottische in between the 19th and early 20th centuries. It remains a very popular music style, particularly in the Northeast region, and is danced in forobordos throughout the country. Frevo originated in Recife, Pernambuco during the Carnival, the period it is most often associated with. While the music presents elements of procession and martial marches, the Frevo dance has been notably influenced by capoeira. Frevo parades are a key tradition of the Pernambuco Carnival. Classical music. Brazil has also a tradition in the classical music since the 18th century. The oldest composer with the full documented work is José Mauricio Nunes Garcia, a Catholic priest who wrote numerous pieces, both sacred and secular, with a style resembling the classical Viennese style from Mozart and Haydn. In the 19th century, the composer Antonio Carlos Gomes wrote several several operas with Brazilian indigenous themes, with librettos in Italian, some of which premiered in Milan. Two of the works are the operas Il Garrone and Lo Schiavo. In the 20th century, Brazil had a strong modernist and nationalist movement, with the works of internationally renowned composers like Heitor Villa-Lobos, Camargo Guarnieri, C.E. Acutessa Guerra-Peaks and Claudio Santoro, and more recently Marlos Nobre and Osvaldo Lacerda. Many famous performers are also from Brazil, such as the opera singer Bidu Sayão, the pianist Nelson Freire and the former pianist and now conductor João Carlos Martins. The city of São Paulo hosts the Sala São Paulo, home of the São Paulo State Symphony Orchestra, one of the most outstanding concert halls of the world. Also, the city of Campos de Jordão hosts yearly in June the Classical Winter Festival, with performances of many instrumentists and singers from all the world. Other genres. Many other genres have originated in Brazil, especially in recent years. Some of the most notable are: the Mangue Beat movement originated in Recife and founded by the late Chico Science and Nakau Zumbi. The music fuses elements of maricatus, frevo, funk rock and hip-hop. Axé is a very popular genre, particularly in the state of Bahia. It is a fusion of Afro-Caribbean rhythms and is strongly associated with the Salvador Carnival. Maracatu is another genre originated in the state of Pernambuco. It evolved from traditions passed by generations of African slaves and features large percussive groups and choirs. Brega is a hard-to-define music style from the state of Para, usually characterized as influenced by Caribbean rhythms and containing simple rhymes, their arrangements and a strong sentimental appeal. It has spawned subgenres such as techno-brega, which has attracted worldwide interest for achieving high popularity without significant support from the phonographic industry. Popular culture. Television has played a large role in the formation of the contemporary Brazilian popular culture. It was introduced in 1950 by Assis Chateaubriand and remains the country's most important element of mass media. Telenovelas are a marking feature in Brazilian television, usually being broadcast in prime time on most major television networks. Telenovelas are similar in concept to soap operas in English-speaking countries but differ from them in duration. Telenovelas being significantly shorter, they are widely watched throughout the country, to the point that they have been described as a significant element in national identity and unity, and have been exported to over 120 countries. Folklore. Brazilian folklore includes many stories, legends, dances, superstitions and religious rituals. Characters include the Boitata, the Boto Cor-de-Rosa, the Sachi and the Bumba Meu Boy, which has spawned the famous June Festival in northern and northeastern Brazil. Sports. Football is the most popular sport in Brazil. Many Brazilian players such as Pelé, Ronaldo, Kaká, and Ronaldinho, also Neymar, are among the most well-known players in the sport. The Brazil national football team is currently among the best in the world, according to the FIFA World Rankings. They have been victorious in the FIFA World Cup a record 5 times, in 1958, 1962, 1970, 1994, and 2002. Basketball, volleyball, auto racing, and martial arts also attract large audiences. Tennis, handball, swimming, and gymnastics have found a growing sporting number of enthusiasts over the last decade. Some sport variations have their origins in Brazil. Beach football, futsal, and foot volley emerged in the country as variations of football. In martial arts, Brazilians have developed capoeira, vale tudo, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. In auto racing, Brazilian drivers have won the Formula One World Championship 8 times. Emerson Fittipaldi in 1972 and 1974, Nelson Piquet in 1981, 1983, and 1987, and Ayrton Senna in 1988, 1990, and 1991. Brazil has undertaken the organization of large-scale sporting events. The country organized and hosted the 1950 FIFA World Cup and the 2014 FIFA World Cup event. The circuit located in São Paulo, called Autódromo José Carlos Pace, hosts the annual Grand Prix of Brazil. São Paulo organized the 4th Pan-American Games in 1963, and Rio de Janeiro hosted the 15th Pan-American Games in 2007. Brazil also tried for the 4th time to host the Summer Olympics with Rio de Janeiro candidature in 2016. On October 2, 2009, Rio de Janeiro was selected to host the 2016 Summer Olympics, which will be the first to be held in South America.